I'm with local actress and comedian and writer Nuala McKeever in her kitchen. Nuala's my sister. And Nuala, what are your vegan credentials? How long have you been vegetarian or vegan? What's
Hello.
Hello.
I became vegetarian when I was 16. My brother, that's you, was vegetarian for a few years, and I wanted to be for a couple of years, and I kept thinking, oh gosh, I can't live without chicken, which seems bizarre now, but I struggled with it for 2 years, and then one day just decided that's it, no more, and I stopped eating meat and fish and all those things. And then for about 2 years I was vegetarian. Then I went to university when I was 18 and became vegan, and found that a bit hard. I remember not being very committed to it the same way I was to vegetarianism. And then I went for a year out to live in Spain to do Spanish as part of my degree, and it was even hard to be a vegetarian in Spain. This was 1984, it's a long time ago. They would serve you the food and then just take the meat out of it and go, there you go. So I lapsed back to being a vegetarian, and that's the way I was, knowing that it was very hypocritical in the sense that I realised always that there was as much cruelty pretty much in the dairy and egg industry as there is in the meat industry. But I kind of lived with that, as we do. We draw our lines in certain places. And then last year, my brother John was running a vegan fair, and I caught a glimpse of a video out of the corner of my eye of a dairy farm practice, and there wasn't anything particularly brutal, but it was bad enough. And I started to cry, and again it was a visceral reaction. I just thought, I can't do this anymore. And that's what pushed me back to being vegan. And like most things, when I embrace a thing, I really embrace it. So I really got into cooking, and I was one of these people who ate a lot of corn and meat substitutes because I quite like that sort of dinner. I don't always like everything to be lentils and healthy. So I was a bit skundered that there wasn't an awful lot really. I started eating TVP soya stuff, but that gave me a lot of indigestion and wind, let's be polite about it. It wasn't very pleasant. And then I discovered this stuff called seitan. I tasted it at one of the vegan vegetarian NI groups potlucks, and I ate a few slices, and I kept going over and saying, are you sure this isn't meat? Are you sure this is vegetarian, it's vegan? So of course nothing would stop me finding out how to do it, and I've maybe made it, I don't know, 30 times now in this last year, and I can't say it's always exactly the same, it's not, but I come and go on it. It's a great substitute, and it slices well, you make it, and I'm going to show you now how I do it. There's lots of different ways to do it. Holly Mitchell seems to be the seitan queen in Northern Ireland, so apologies if I'm not doing it quite as well as hers. But this is the version, it's a cobbled together version that I do. So if you want to have a look, I'll show you.
Okay, all sounds good. Let's go. So what is seitan exactly?
Well, you came at the beginning of a picture of this stuff here. Bob's Red Mill, that's just one brand. Vital Wheat gluten flour. They wash flour and they get the gluten out of it, which forms, it's this kind of, what's the term, rubbery stuff, you know, that makes bread spongy. And they wash it out and it becomes a flour like this. So obviously if you're gluten intolerant, you need to run a mile from this, but otherwise it's essentially...
Can you get gluten-free seitan?
People have asked that online. Can you get a gluten-free version of that? And you're going, yes, it would be an empty bowl with some herbs in it. Go at it. No, not to be cheeky, but no, I think the essence of gluten is gluten, so no.
Yeah.
Okay, so essentially what you're making is a type of bread, I suppose, although it's much denser than bread. But in theory, in practice, you're taking dry ingredients, wet ingredients, mixing them together, kneading it. Then I cook it in a pot of broth for about an hour. There's your broth.
Okay, what's in that?
Just to show that we're not telling no lies.
Mm-hmm.
It's water and bouillon powder, and I'll tell you the amounts if you're really that keen, or we could put a recipe up later, might be easier.
Yeah.
And some soy sauce and oil. So first thing you do, it's flour, Vital Wheat gluten flour, and then you also put in a big spoon, a dessert spoon, no, a tablespoon you call this, of gram flour, which is chickpea flour. So I'm using 2 cups, these are cups, 2 American sized cups of the Vital Wheat gluten. The recipe I used called for 1, but I'm doubling it, so instead of 1 tablespoon, I'm doing 2 tablespoons of gram flour, mix that in. Then you put in, it would be 3 tablespoons of the yeast flakes, what do you call it? Nutritional yeast.
Yeah.
So it'll be 3 of these per cup, so I would need 6, but I think I'm going to run out because I didn't get enough. Right, so I haven't really got enough, but in general that would be 6 tablespoons of that, and then you put in lots of flavourings. The main one I think would be, not the main one, would be sage. I put quite a lot. They always say an eighth, but I put in a teaspoon of that. Put in a teaspoon of onion granules. These are good things to have. It's onion powder essentially, onion granules, a teaspoon of that. Garlic granules, again, good thing to have. I had never heard of these things before I started making all this. Vegan's best friend, smoked paprika. And there's different types. I got some at the Asian supermarket. I don't have the name of it here, but it's a different kettle of ball games altogether from the stuff I used to buy in Sainsbury's.
Right.
Is there a brand name on it? No, I can't see it. Anyway, oh there is. Hold on, I'll tell you about that later. But you can really smell that. It's very smoky. It's like a barbecue crisp sort of flavour. So I would put in 2 teaspoons of that because it gives it nice flavour. And then you could put in a wee bit of oregano, or you can make this seitan to look a bit like chicken, keeping it a paler colour. And if you're doing that, what works quite well apparently is tarragon. It's not a herb I would use very much, but I put in maybe half a teaspoon of that. And then, because more is more in my book and I always overdo it, I put in a wee bit of thyme, just whatever you have.
Just whatever flavours you like, really.
Yeah, and you don't taste them all. I don't. There's rosemary here. I put a wee bit of that because it's a funny, rosemary's a funny sort of texture, you know, it's quite big and lumpy. Anyway, you can smell all the tarragon's quite specific, or quite, I can notice it quite a lot because I don't use it very often. Maybe I'm more in tune.
It's nice just like that.
Yes, it's lovely. So another great thing to have is a good spatula, a good bendy rubbery one. I'll use that. It's great for mixing things through, especially when you put liquid in. You get it all in, and you also don't have stuff up the side of the bowl. You can scrape it all in. Now here's a tip. Make sure you mix the dry things together very well. One of the times I made this, I added the liquid when all the dry stuff was just piled in on top. And it all clumped in big lumps of one taste or another, and it was a disaster. Now later on we're going to add soy sauce, so if you're adding soy sauce you don't need to put in salt, but if you're not adding soy sauce, if you want it to stay kind of white looking, you can put in ordinary salt, about a teaspoon again.
Okay.
So now we're going to add wet stuff. I have made up basically 2 litres of liquid, half of it. So a litre of stock, I made it in the saucepan. I added bouillon powder to hot water, made a litre plus a cup. I took out a cup of stock and I put it in this measuring bowl, measuring jug, and then I take a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of oil. That goes into the wet as well.
Any oil do, or what do you use? Sunflower?
Well, I just use this ordinary light olive oil.
Olive oil,
yes,
okay.
Cheapish olive oil. Not cheap, but you know, whatever. And then if you want, it calls for quite a lot of soy sauce, a wee quarter cup, which is 60 milligrams. So having cups is quite good. Investing in a set of these cups, because a lot of recipes online are American, and you could start doing the translation, but it becomes a real pain-o in the neck-o. So you've got soy sauce, oil and stock. Let me consult my very high-tech recipe here. We've got broth, soy sauce, olive oil, minced garlic. Well, I've already got the garlic in it, so then just
add this in.
mixez-vous all that there together, and it becomes, you can just throw it all in. Can you see that? Mix it all through. In real time this is probably a little longer than you might want to watch a recipe being done, but there's no way to speed it up. So you can see it turns out quite dark. You get all that mixed together. Sometimes it feels a wee bit dry, and you could add a wee tiny bit more of the broth, take it out of the pot, or just a wee bit of water. Now at this point then you start mixing it with your hands. Can I depart for 1 second? I realise I did wash my hands before I came into the kitchen, but let me just do it again. Because I'm going to use my hands now to knead this. So if you excuse me, I'll clear a bit of space here. So get your hands in there and gather up all the dry. I wish you could feel this. It's got the consistency of a soft squash ball or something like that. It's very squishy, but firm, squishy. You know, I'll leave that to your imagination, what that reminds you of. And when you've got all the stuff collected off the bowl, set that aside. Don't put water in it yet because you're going to use it to cover. And on a clean surface, then you want to start kneading this. And wee bits will fly out, but just wrap them, gather them up. So you can see how it's like bread. And your hands get very red with the smoked paprika colouring. But it's quite rubbery, and the more you knead it, the stiffer and more rubbery it will get. And that's what you want really, so that you get a good dense thing. Otherwise, I've made it before and I've put a little bit of fast acting yeast. One of the recipes I used to use called for that, but it would often come out being a bit holy and spongy and a bit wet and spongy, which was not a very nice, to use a disgusting phrase, mouthfeel. We don't want a bad mouthfeel. So also the more you knead it, it gets smoother. And there's always a bit like that that's a bit yuck. But the rest of it starts to smooth out, and it's elastic. That's the word that has been eluding me.
It's the gluten, isn't it?
The gluten is the elasticity.
Yeah. It's fairly vigorous then. Your kneading is fairly vigorous, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it could be workout. Some recipes say knead it for 2 or 3 minutes, or some say 5 minutes. And I don't know what I do till my arms are falling out of me. But and also you can start to feel it under your hands getting smooth and shiny, and less like a brain, more like plastic. So that's probably a good sign. And then, like bread, you let it sit. Most of the recipes I've seen, you see how it's getting really smooth?
Yeah, I can see that now.
That's the kind of way it starts, and that's the way it starts to go. And I presume that's the gluten going to work. The gluten's the thing in the bread that has to be processed in a way to give it that elasticity. And the problem that I've read with a lot of people in gluten is that bread now is done in a different method to how it used to be made. Fast processed bread doesn't get the gluten blended up enough or elasticated enough. Sorry, for somebody who has good command of the language, my English words seem to be deserting me today.
Yeah, the gluten's not activated really.
Activated, thank you. Yeah, so
these modern machines or modern processes aren't.
Yeah, well, that's why things like old, you used to think, why do French and Spanish people not seem to have massive constipation from eating all that white bread? But their white bread traditionally was made in a more traditional manner, and isn't the same as eating that awful plastic white pan loaf that passes for food here. Stop me if I sound pompous. There you go.
Looks good.
Well, for what it is. So just to keep the air off it, the flies off it, I cover that up and let it sit for maybe 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay. And then what happens after that?
Well, then we'll take it out and put it into a pot here, which has half broth, half water. So a litre of broth and a litre of ordinary water mixed. So basically 2 litres of liquid in a big pot. And we'll take the loaf of seitan and we'll put it in there and we'll simmer it very gently, very, very gently for an hour. It takes an hour to do. And then let it sit in the liquid for a while, then take it out, let it drain a little bit. And what I do with it then is, you could eat it like that, but I like to slice it up and fry it in the pan, cover it in a bit of smoked paprika, fry it up in a bit of oil in the pan, and it comes out like nice slices of whatever, meat substitute. And it stays well in the fridge for maybe up to a week. You can freeze it as well. It's possibly a bit better the next day when it has solidified a little bit more. If you try to fry it straight away, it can still be a wee bit wet, but let it sit for a bit. It comes out well, and it gives you a really good chewy texture. That's what you miss sometimes when you're eating vegan. Things can be very soft or nuts, so this is neither soya nor nuts nor squishy. So it's good, and it's great in a sandwich, and it's great just fried and put alongside your spuds or your rice or whatever else you're having.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks very much.
Bye.
Thank you.